It is impossible to walk on the beach without making an imprint in the sand and taking some of it with us. Life is very much the same. If we notice this, we might be more aware of our actions and words. Imagine one day you would have overslept because you didn't hear your alarm go off. You would check the time and rush to get ready. But then you realize you don't hear your feet making any stomping noises. You can't hear the water running from the sink. You can't hear the morning birds sing. And you can only hear yourself think. What would you do? It is rather hard to explain what it is like to be deaf from a hearing person's perspective. We will never fully understand unless we are in their situation. It is even challenging to understand what it is like when a deaf person explains it to you.
Sometimes when she wakes up in the morning she thinks, oh, I wish I could hear. She never thought before, but she's happy. So she has a very good life. She can ask for more. She's got everything in life. Got a good husband, nice children, beautiful family.
The relationship between deaf and hearing people can be tricky at times, as they do not quite live the same lives. But this is not always the case, as Brenda Moore describes her bond with the deaf community.
When I was younger, I saw one of the movies, and it had sign language in it. They were doing sign language, and it was fascinating to me how they were able to talk with each other without using their voices at all. And when I started looking at careers, sign language working with the deaf had come up because I knew I wanted to be a teacher. But I wasn't sure I wanted to be a classroom teacher, so I wanted to specialize more. So I went to Michigan State University, that's known for its teaching, but they also have a fantastic deaf ed program. So they have a specific four-year course where they teach sign language, and then they also give you like a teaching degree to go with it. So that was part of what I did. And then during my internship, I absolutely fell in love with it when I worked in a preschool classroom, a deaf ed preschool classroom. So these little, like 3- and 4-year-old kids came in. Some of them had like the cochlear implants, and some of them did not. So we were basically their first touch of some kind of vocabulary. So we were giving them American Sign Language, and then that actually translates through most of the United States. But they're still like slang, little parts and pieces where like Georgia might use this, but in Michigan has no idea. But for the most part, the American Sign Language could be used anywhere in the United States. So that's what we were trying to teach them. The second part of my internship was in a 4th grade deaf ed classroom. And that was a whole different thing because the little ones had no language, but the 4th graders already had a pretty rich sign language base. So it was really fun to see the contrast where the 4th graders could just be sitting in the corner having a huge conversation together with the signs just flying out their hands, as to the little ones where we had to try and give them that base. So I went.
There is a very large difference between being deaf since birth as to becoming deaf later in life. Hearing people do not consider this often. But picture yourself alive for the very first time, and one of your senses was missing. You can see your parents, smell the presence of medication, taste the warmth of milk, and feel the softness of the wrapped around blanket. But you cannot hear yourself cry, or the voice of your own mother. On the other hand, if you are used to hearing only the simplest sounds, and then one day, it just vanishes. It would be something that will take quite a bit of time to get used to. Colin Thompson compares himself with his son.
People here into a deaf family where everybody was saying I could only put that with it. And it was difficult for me front and when they went up from the door, after that was controversial shaking that door, somebody at the door. And then to be pushed away from them to don't be back on the door. And that quite well, he said, no, you only saw and very that far. I thought, yeah, you can't understand me. I can speak, I can hear. And for the people talking to the fact that I could hear, they tended to talk to me. And that's a responsibility for me. That's the next one to walk out. It was one good enough. So that was it. And for me, one of the games, the day before my behaviour, sometimes still do get frustrated because I know what it's like to be. I know what it's like to be at people going to about the age of 14, after 15, 16, I don't know at all. So I think somebody who knows what it's like to behave, you know what you're missing, it's a bit difficult to adopt. Now my son Ben doesn't know what it's like to be. He only knows one way of life and it's very straightforward. The same way for you, you go on to live, your life is very straightforward. You have therefore difficulty with this.
Most hearing people are not extremely aware of deaf people's lives, not because they don't want to be, just because that is not what they think about in their day-to-day lives. One of the most effective ways to learn about oneself is by taking seriously the cultures of others. It forces you to pay attention to those details of life which differentiate them from you. Glenn Barham introduces how he started to interact with deaf people and what an impact it had on him.
The neighbour at the shops, in the street, what would you feel? Isolation? Frustration? Alone? But what if it's not a neighbour or a shopkeeper? What if you needed to get an ambulance for a seriously ill child or needed to contact the police or fire service? Then what? Fear? Panic? Desperation? Well, for many deaf people, those are feelings that can be experienced here in the world today. If I can just give you an idea of my background so that you understand how I came to be involved in deaf issues. I don't have a deaf family, but I do remember the first time that I met a deaf man at work. And it was round about 1990, and I was on duty at a football match in Southampton doing point duty, directing traffic. And I stopped a car and the driver beckoned me over. And as he spoke to me, I realised that he was deaf. And I realised that actually all he was asking me was what the final score was at the football match. And I was straight away panicked and thinking, how am I going to communicate this? And then with all my energy, I managed to muster 1-0. And at the time, I felt quite proud about that. I thought that was really good, that I've managed to communicate with that deaf man. But later in the evening, thinking about it, I realised just how basic our communication had been, how limited, how pathetic. And I decided then that I wanted to go and learn signs. And my deaf tutor, Suzanne Chivers, was there, and she was teaching us how to introduce ourselves. And as part of the learning, she asked people what their jobs were so that she could show them the sign. And the police amongst the audience may know, maybe it's different here, I don't know, but back home, when somebody asks you what you do for a living, there's always that moment when you think, I don't know how they're going to react to this. Because not everybody likes the police. And being a traffic officer can make that a little bit worse. But anyway, she'd asked the question, and we had a teacher, so she signed teacher. And it went round the room, and I thought, well, here we go. I said, I'm a policeman. And she immediately paused, and she looked at me. And then everyone else in the room looked at me. And there was that moment when I thought, maybe that wasn't a good idea. And then she said, "Can I talk to you about that at the end?" I went, "Yeah, sure." And I have to say, I was thinking she's been caught doing 31 miles an hour in a 30 limit. But anyway, the class finished and I went up to speak to her. What I wasn't expecting was that she was going to ask me a question that would quite literally change my life. And I know that that sounds really dramatic. Can a question change your life? Well, hers did. It changed my entire direction, and it really wasn't something I expected. The question that she asked me was this: do you know how difficult it is for deaf people to access the police? Well, I'd never given it any thought, never, not until that moment. But I did afterwards, and I met with other deaf people, and I went and did a deaf awareness course and learned more. And you start to look at the history of deaf people's interactions with the police. And then you start to realise why, historically, and in many cases still today, deaf people are suspicious of the police because we don't interact. You look at how we interact with children in schools, and I've seen examples and spoken to people, and they've told me how when the police officer arrived was when the communication support was told, "Oh, you can take a break now," and the deaf children have been excluded from that interaction with the police. And there's many different examples I could give you where we haven't engaged with deaf people through the years.
What society seems to aim for in this world is equality. And with this, people seem to forget that equality isn't just about the color of your skin or what gender you are. It is about anything that differentiates you from one person to another, whether you're short or tall, skinny or fat, big house or small house. Whether you're a police officer, a teacher, a postman, or simply a citizen from Gibraltar. None of it really matters, because in a way, we're all very much alike. Even after a look in a different world, from the inside, we're all exactly the same.